Hi Trotters friends! Today I'm so excited. We're going to do another awesome science experiment. Today we're going to talk about the density of salt water. Salt water. I wonder where you could find salt water. You're right. When we go to the beach and we go for a lovely swim, we're swimming in salt water in the ocean. And if you notice, when you lie back and make your arms stretch out like a starfish, you are able to float in the salt water much more easily than if you were in your swimming pool. I wonder why that is. Well, let's do an experiment and talk about the density of salt water. So right now we know that water has a weight. Everything has a weight. This spoon has a certain weight to it. It feels a certain way. This spoon is heavy. And this pen feels light. Just like this cup of water is heavier than this cup without water. This cup is really light. It means it doesn't take as much muscle for me to lift this cup as it does for me to lift this cup. The cup with this water is heavier. Water has a weight to it. So how do things float? Let's do some experiments. I'm going to fill this cup up with the same amount of water. And let's see if certain things float and certain things don't. Let's take this rock. Do you think this rock will float in the water? Let's see. It didn't float. Look at it, just went straight down to the bottom. Wow. I wonder if this flower petal will float. This flower petal is much lighter than the rock. The rock has more density. This flower petal is not as dense. Look at that. The flower petal floats on the water because the water weighs more than the flower petal. The water has a greater density. It weighs more. How could we change the density of water? If we added salt to the water, would it make a difference? Let's get our thinking caps on and let's do some science. Okay, I'm gonna take this flower petal out. Goodbye, flower petal. And I'm actually gonna take this heavy rock out. Goodbye, rock. I wonder what would happen if we take an egg and we put the egg in the water. Do you think that the egg will float? Do you think the egg is heavier? Or do you think the water is heavier? Whichever one has the most density is the heaviest. Let's see what happens. Oh, it doesn't float. It's gone all the way down to the bottom of the glass. But if we make this salt water just like the water that we find in the ocean, I wonder if the salt water will cause the water to be heavier and will give the water the ability to make the egg float. Let's do some. We take an egg and we put the egg in the water. Do you think that the egg will float? Do you think the egg is heavier? Or do you think the water is heavier? Whichever one has the most density is the heaviest. Let's see what happens. Oh, it doesn't float. It's gone all the way down to the bottom of the glass. But if we make this salt water just like the water that we find in the ocean, I wonder if the salt water will cause the water to be heavier and will give the water the ability to make the egg float. Let's do some science. So you're gonna take a tablespoon. You're gonna take some salt that you have just probably in your kitchen, and we are gonna count 3 tablespoons in our water. Make sure your water's a little bit warm so that the salt will dissolve into the water. It will mix and disperse evenly. So we've got 1 tablespoon. Do you see that salt? Did you know that salt comes from nature. Where does salt come from? Let me show you. Do you see this rock right here? This is called a salt rock, and this is all salt. These rocks exist all around the planet, and the salt runs from the rocks into the rivers and into the ocean, and that's what makes our oceans salty. Look at salt water looks different than water that has no salt in it. That was 1 tablespoon. We mixed it pretty well. I bet you are great at mixing. Let's add 2 tablespoons. Oh, keep mixing. What we're doing when we add the salt, we are causing the water to have more weight. We are making the water heavier. And if the water has a greater weight, a greater density, then the egg will float. This is amazing. And let's add 1 last tablespoon of salt. That is a lot of salt. Let's see what happens. Okay, mix really, really well because we want to make sure that the salt particles dissolve into the water. That means that they mix really beautifully together. I think it's ready. Are you ready? Oh, I'm so excited. Let's take the egg. Do you think this egg is going to float in the salt water? I wonder. Oh my goodness, do you see it? Do you see it bouncing at the surface? Just like if you were at the beach. You are much more able to float in salt water. Oh, I love this experiment. We could do a whole bunch of things. Let's take our eggs out. Keep your mixtures when you do this at home. Try not to crack your eggs. You can use them for some baking or a yummy omelet. Find other things around your house that might float. Maybe you're a little Lego people. Do you think she'll float in salt water? Let's see. Oh my goodness, it's like she's at the beach. This is such a great lesson in density. The salt water is much more dense than the water when it doesn't have salt. The salt makes the water have a greater density, and that is often why certain things float. Wow, I hope you have fun learning about density, and next time you're at the beach, try and float in the salt water. And just remember, if it wasn't for the salt water, it would be much, much harder to do that experiment at the beach. I hope you have a great time, and it's been so much fun teaching you about science. Bye, bye Trotty's friends.